South Korea has managed the pandemic well. It has been one of the more successful countries in minimizing the number of deaths and infections from COVID-19. It has also managed to avoid significant economic decline in 2020, unlike most of the world's major economies. Despite these overall successes, South Korea's new president, Yoon Suk Yeol, will continue to face challenges from the pandemic domestically, internationally, and in relations to North Korea during his time in office. Even with the successful development and deployment of COVID-19 vaccines to much of the world, the virus continues to evolve relatively quickly. The dominant Omicron variant was first detected in November of 2021, but we are now seeing the spread of subvariants BA4 and BA5. While Omicron has been relatively mild, it has also been significantly more contagious than prior variants. With the virus continuing to evolve, the Yoon administration potentially faces an endemic virus in COVID-19 and the possibility that future variants could be more lethal. Domestically, the Yoon administration, in its early days, has taken steps to loosen COVID restrictions and to provide support to small business owners and the self-employed who have seen their businesses or income hurt by the pandemic. In time, however, new variants may require additional restrictions or financial support for industries most affected by the pandemic. On the international level, South Korea's contribution to fighting the pandemic trails that of other nations. For example, despite being the world's 10th largest economy, South Korea is not among the 25 top countries and territories in terms of donations to COVAX. The Yoon administration took initial steps to address this issue by pledging to provide $300 million to the WHO's Access to COVID-19 Tools Accelerator from 2023 to 2025. However, South Korea is well placed to contribute more financially to ending the pandemic. South Korea has the lowest level of debt to GDP among the world's 10 largest economies and also has had a relatively strong economic recovery from the pandemic. With South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol having called for South Korea to step up on issues such as the pandemic and to take on a global role more befitting of its status as one of the world's 10 largest economies, how South Korea can contribute to dealing with the pandemic globally will remain an issue. The Yoon administration, however, will also have to deal with the implications of COVID-19 in North Korea. After 2 years of claiming to have no cases of COVID-19, Pyongyang announced its first case in mid-May. While the reported numbers have declined since peaking at around 400,000 suspected cases a day, the spread of COVID to North Korea has 3 implications for South Korea related to assisting with the management of the pandemic in the north, encouraging a level of transparency from Pyongyang, and how the pandemic shapes North Korea in the long term. While North Korea is reported to have accepted limited amounts of aid to deal with its outbreak, it is still in need of assistance. Because North Korea lacks a sufficient testing regime, it has resorted to reporting cases of fever rather than COVID. While COVID can cause fever, not all fevers are COVID-related, and not all COVID cases result in a fever. To have a good understanding of the situation in North Korea, international collaboration to ensure adequate testing is necessary. In addition to testing, North Korea will need access to vaccines to treat the population. Much of the population will become exposed to COVID in the current outbreak, but the population as a whole will not, and vaccines will help to provide additional protection against future waves of COVID. It will also need access to equipment and therapeutics to treat individuals with COVID. Encouraging transparency related to the pandemic will also be an issue. With the possibility of new variants developing in North Korea, there is a need for periodic genetic sequencing of the COVID strains circulating in the north. Lastly, the pandemic has resulted in a North Korea that is even more closed off from the world than it was previously. If COVID does become endemic, how will that change North Korea? Will Pyongyang choose to maintain its tight controls on trade and travel? What implications would a more isolated North Korea have for its society and future negotiations? These are some of the pandemic-related uncertainties that the Yoon administration will need to navigate with North Korea over the next 5 years.